Mr. Narcisse is running for governor in the state of Iowa, and let me...
Well, it's great to be back. Well, even prior to serving on the Des Moines School Board, I headed up state education and health hearings. We worked with all the major school districts in the state. We held them in a dozen communities around the state, including Davenport. Worked closely with the Davenport School District and the Mississippi Bend AEA. At the time, Glenn Pellick was the head of the Mississippi Bend AEA. We had tremendous support from the state. We even developed a collaboration with the U.S. Department of Education. Our efforts made national news. From there, we were able to get a significant number of education reforms through, as well as work with local school districts and communities to develop education collaboratives. And then I got elected to the school board. Even though some individuals didn't like some of the things I said, like we're not graduating students, we were able to get a number of reforms through. In fact, a gentleman by the name of J. Michael McCoy, he was a local radio show host. On September 10th, 2007, he made a list. On the next day I was elected, on July 3rd, 2009, less than 2 years later, we sat down. I sat down with him on his show. Every item on that list got checked off, and there were more than 24 reforms that we got through. Some of them were small, like getting weekly construction updates to board members on our local option tax projects. Some of them were bigger, like getting a new code of conduct, but we got results. That's all. That's all. Yeah. Well, there's two things. There's officially failing, which the media simply won't acknowledge or report on in this state. And it's unfortunate because that standard has devastating consequences to our schools. And then there's the unofficially failing, which is also important to explore. And when I talk about officially failing, last Labor Day weekend, the Culver administration, almost in secrecy, released its annual report card on Iowa schools. 32 out of 33 high schools in our 10 largest cities officially failing. 37 of the 40 middle schools officially failing. This is devastating. And the consequences of failing under No Child Left Behind, schools move to teaching the test curriculum, which then leads to students that don't need that kind of, minimal education being bored, and then we start losing them. For example, in Des Moines, the year I left the school board, poor kids weren't our largest block of dropouts, even though they were a supermajority of our district. The largest group of our dropouts were middle class and affluent white kids with two parents around. But that's because we had stopped educating them, and they just simply weren't into being trained to take tests for the next 2, 3, 4 years. We see devastating consequences in terms of our human infrastructure. Every high school teacher in the Davenport area is on a list to be fired. Every high school and middle school teacher in Cedar Rapids, every high school and middle school teacher in Sioux City, Waterloo, Des Moines, even West Des Moines and Ames are on a list to be fired because of No Child Left Behind. It has the potential to devastate our human infrastructure, administrators and teachers being reassigned. And there's a simple solution. You opt out of No Child Left Behind, and you begin focusing on how we begin educating our kids again. So the officially failing status officially failing status is beyond conversation or refutation, which unfortunately, well, the governor, unfortunately, the governor is digging deeper into the rabbit hole. Now, oh, no question. Absolutely. You have to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because No Child Left Behind by design was structured so that ultimately every school district fails, which then means the federal government has the ability to come in and dictate what education looks like. Now, they give the carrot of money. So you see a Culver administration chasing race to the top money. It's a minimal amount of money. Well, it's a minimal amount of money compared to the amount of money that actually exists in public education in Iowa. If people understood, you know, I do a TV show in Des Moines, and I introduce people to one of the most devastating weapons that has ever existed in public education discourse, and that's a calculator. Now, I was down in Mahaska County a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to a supervisor. Now, that's over in the Oskaloosa area. And I said, imagine, now, on the state's website, we show where we spend $8,500 per pupil in school districts with fewer than 300 kids in 2006. Now, we have 15 kids in $2,006. That school is generating, that classroom, $127,500, paying the teacher in that size district $40,000 in 2009. So where's the other $87,500 go? And he said, well, my wife has 25 kids in her class. I said, well, add $85,000 to that. You know, if individuals ever break out a calculator, if you ever broke out a calculator in Davenport and started adding up how much money they spend in a classroom, particularly when you talk about ELL kids, title kids, special ed funding, the amount of money you're generating in your classrooms would just be staggering, particularly when contrasted to what they pay teachers. The teachers have to buy supplies, that there aren't often you know, enough resources in the classrooms. So, you know, the calculator is a devastating weapon in the education conversation against those folks, the politicians and the bureaucrats that have controlled that. Now, we have remedies, but opting out of No Child Left Behind is vital. That's on the officially failing side. On the unofficially failing side, this travesty has been going on for years. Now, if you look at the attrition rate during the Culver years, you'll find where we may lose 40, 50%, in some instances 60% of the students compared to the freshman class. Now, in 1991, sure.